are, in large part, depends on our genes. It's a hand we're dealt when we're born, and the cards we play our entire lives. You can study as hard as you can, but some people will be smarter. Work out as much as you want. Some people are born to be bigger or prettier or more artistic. The hand you get depends upon the luck of the draw. Which genes you get from your mother, which you get from your father, and how they combine to make you a unique individual is largely a matter of chance. In the game of life, the shuffling of genes to create a new individual is called sex. But life didn't have to be this way. We could reproduce like some weeds do by putting out shoots. Talk about a family tree. Or by fragmentation. A little gruesome maybe, but it works for tapeworms. Spores are the method of choice for mushrooms. Millions could show up for a family reunion. Or we could do it the way amoebas do, simply getting fat and dividing. But no, we have to do it the hard way. For human reproduction, it takes two, and sex.
This fact that it takes two organisms to produce one organism is really a paradox in biology, because it would be much simpler just for one organism to produce one organism, virgin birth, or to have females go about just cloning themselves and producing their offspring.
Consider the whiptail lizard.
These are parthenogenetic animals, which means they're all female. This individual will lay eggs, and all of the offspring will be female, and they will be genetically identical to the sisters and to mom.
Now this is efficiency. A single sex. When a whiptail's biological clock goes off, she just lays some eggs. Sex education classes for whiptails would take about 3 minutes. No complicated mating or that sperm stuff, just instant motherhood.
Life by default is female. Reproduction requires providing offspring with nourishments and resources, and so this is the female function. And asexual species, species that don't have sex, are always all female, without any males. And so the female function has to exist for life to exist.
As you all know, for one thing and one thing only do we need men.
Can't you do any better than that?
Oh!
The way I like to think of it is that the female is the ancestral sex. In evolution, the first individuals, replicating individuals, had to have been what we call a female type of individual, and that males evolved after those kinds of individuals.
But even here among the virgins, there is something else going on. They don't have any need or even equipment for mating, but that doesn't seem to stop them from trying.
These individuals will interact in a way where one individual will take a male-like role, the other individual will take a female-like role, and in so doing they will stimulate one another to lay eggs.
But if males aren't necessary for reproduction, why is there sex at all? Why did males evolve? The answers to why and how males became the second sex are coming out of research into microscopic single-celled organisms, bacteria.
We can do things to the bacteria that we would never dream of doing to other organisms. We can manipulate their mates. We can make them have sex with members of different species even. We can do all kinds of terrible things to them and still come home at night and go to sleep without feeling bad. Although we don't think of bacteria as being sexual, they don't have any of the obvious features that we look for in a sexy partner. They are, in fact, very sexual creatures. The bacteria that I study, they don't have any hang-ups about mating, really. They take almost any DNA molecule, they bind it, and they bring it into the cell. But they only recombine in those molecules that are from members of their same species.
How sex started in the first place still puzzles evolutionary biologists. Perhaps it started with a cell eating an associate, the eater taking in the genes of the eatee. The complex and wonderful world of sexual creatures may have begun as cannibalism. Well, that's one idea.
The second idea is that cells have sex not for their own well-being, but because for the transfer of the selfish genetic elements that live inside the cell.
This is the parasite theory. When you look at it this way, self-centered genes are in charge of evolution, and organisms are just a way for genes to duplicate themselves.
The third view is that sex evolves as a kind of repair shop, whereby the errors that are trapped in one cell can be repaired by the spare parts that exist in another cell. This is the view that we've concentrated on in our work, and the view that we think makes the most sense.
However sex got started, it seems safe to say that through eons of evolution, the creatures with two sexes were more successful than creatures with just a single sex. That's why sex has survived to become one of the facts of life. In the beginning, and for hundreds of millions of years, the Earth's seas were seething with multiplying molecules. There was no sex and nothing much changed for eons until one day some simple cells exchanged genes and changed the world. Literally, those simple cells that had sex evolved. It began with the first species that covered the globe.
Plants are basic. They're the food for all the world. And I consider biology the study of plants and their parasites. And everything else is a parasite on plants. To eat them. We do. And if we don't eat the plants, we eat something that ate the plants.
A botanist like Professor Warren Wagner can be forgiven for being a plant chauvinist. After all, in the beginning came pond scum.
It starts with the green algae. And the green algae have all sorts of life cycles. Then you get to the ferns, and the ferns have the simplest life cycle of all. They're quite decent. But then when you get to the seed plants, and particularly the flowering plants, it's really complicated. And you get many, many, many different forms of sexual reproduction.
But what's the point? Why is there plant sex?
The present thinking, I think, is that sex is necessary for the evolution of plants. Plants require two special things. One of them is to reproduce themselves, to occupy space. And the other one is to change. You've got to change because there's changes in climate, changes in rainfall, changes because of volcanoes, changes because of new kinds of organisms. And in order to be in this melange of all these constantly changing things, you're going to have to change yourself. And the only way to do that is through sex.
But plants have roots. They can't move around much, so for there to be sex in the flower bed, plants had to find a